Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I'm going to be drawing a rose, and this is something that might look like it's really difficult to draw, but I'm going to show you how to use some simple steps that you can follow so you can draw a drawing just like this. Okay, so my first tip is that I want you to be drawing from life. Now, the reason for that is that when you draw from life, you get a lot more details that you can look at. Whereas when you're drawing from a photograph, it's already flat. So it's not the end of the world if you're drawing from a photograph, but ideally in this, you're drawing from actually from a rose. So you want to start with a pretty good pencil sketch just so that you have all the details there. So spend some time with your drawing at the beginning, just getting a good pencil sketch on there. The whole concept of drawing when you're a beginning drawer is that you're looking at something that's 3D and you're trying to get it onto a 2D surface. So if you're still struggling with your pencil sketch, I'll put some links in the description of some other videos that I have that help with this idea of getting an accurate pencil sketch. But here I have already the pencil sketch and I'm adding my lines. So my second tip is that when you add your lines, you want to think about this idea of direction of line. So what I mean by that is that you want to be mindful of the direction that your lines are going. And you don't want your lines just to be haphazard, sort of going in any random direction. You want them to be sort of mapping or wrapping around the form, which will make it look more three-dimensional. And I'm using micron pens in this, and I'll link to the description some links for these pens. Now, I use these for a couple reasons. One, they're archival, which means that they won't fade over time. They're very well made and they last a pretty long time. And the other thing that I like about them is that they come in a lot of different sizes. So this is a 02. The smallest size that they come in is a 005, and that's even finer mark. So you want to experiment with those kind of pens. And the nice thing about these pens is that they'll give you really fine marks. So the difference between this and say like a Sharpie, it's like night and day because a Sharpie gives like a lot kind of like fatter lines, and you'll be able to have a lot more control with thin lines like you can get from these pens. And I'm also, as far as materials, I'm using gray paper, and I'm using that because at the end I'll show you how that's going to come in handy with some white marks that we're going to add at the very end, which will make it more contrasty. Now that brings me to my third tip. So my third tip is that you want to use contrast. So contrast is simply when you have a variation between your darkest darks, your midtones, and your lights. And anytime you're using contrast, when you have kind of like sudden changes between dark to light, as you can already kind of see in some of these petals, you have more contrast. So more contrast will make it look more realistic and it'll make a more interesting drawing. So I want you to be really, really careful to notice specific details. Like right now, you notice that I'm drawing these very, very subtle petals. And those kind of little details are going to be what makes your drawing really stand out and work really well. So look really closely at those kind of details. Look at how dark they are, how light they are. Those are the kind of things that I want you to be looking for. So whenever you're cross-hatching, another thing that you can pay attention to is your speed of your mark. So how fast you're making your lines or how slow you're making them, that's something that you can vary. And then just, things like how long the lines are, how short they are. So here you can see that my lines are a little bit longer and a little bit quicker. So try just varying your line speed and different line variation. I'm currently trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by January and I'm at 800. So if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and please like the video. And please also leave a comment since that helps get it out to a lot more people. So my fourth tip is to use very precise details. So you want to look at the details. Again, goes back to the first tip that I had about drawing from life and how important that is. And you want to try to really show those details because that will help give a sense of the texture. So, just look really closely at the details. Use my drawing here as a guide for you. My fifth tip for you is to have patience. So cross-hatching requires a pretty good amount of patience, especially for a drawing like this that has a lot of detail. So if you're drawing something like my last drawing that I recorded was a pomegranate, and it didn't take very long. It was pretty easy to draw. But this has a lot of petals, and once you do one, they're all kind of similar, so it's not like it's going to be that difficult once you get a hang of it. I think you're going to really find that this is actually very doable. It looks intimidating at first, but I think that you're going to find that it's easier than you think it is. But it does take a lot of time. And so generally speaking, when I've seen people struggle with cross-hatching, it's that they want it to go faster and they want to kind of rush. And so they sort of start sort of doing like a lot of haphazard, quick lines, and they're not being as careful and precise as they need to be. So I want you to make sure that you have the time and the patience to be sure to try to do this kind of drawing. And even if you have to do that in more than one sitting, if you get tired, that's fine. You just don't want to kind of like rush it too much. Okay, so one other really important thing is that I don't want you to draw too harsh outlines around any of the petals. So as you can see right now, I'm kind of drawing a little bit of an outline, but I'm not doing it too dark. If you draw your marks too dark, you're going to flatten out the drawing too much. So if you are doing anything around, that's fine, as long as it's going to have a clear edge, which is good. You want clear edges, that's okay. But if you have too harsh outlines, it's going to flatten it out. So that's just something to be careful of and be mindful of too. And also, the expression, if you can't see the forest for the trees, you want to also step back from your drawing periodically and just look at it as a whole, because when you're drawing a drawing like this that has a lot of details, it's easy to get caught up in the details, right? So as I said, you want to be mindful of the details, you want to draw the details, but you also want to look at the overarching structure and drawing as a whole, and not only be looking at the details, because if you're only looking at the details, then you're going to maybe sometimes like miss the big picture. So it's, that's why artists frequently will kind of like step back from their drawing and just look at your drawing as a whole and make sure that, the contrast is working and the lines are working and that just the entire drawing as a whole is working. Okay, so finally we're done with the flower for the most part, and we can now move on to the little bud vase that's holding the flower. And now I'm going to be able to show you how to draw reflective objects. So you're going to get a little lesson on drawing reflective objects as well in this one. And if you're interested in learning more on reflective objects, let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do more tutorials on reflective objects. But so in a nutshell, the way to do reflective objects is high contrast, right? So having really sudden transitions between very dark and very light is what's going to make it look reflective, like glass or like metal. This here is glass, so it has to look both reflective and it also has to look translucent. You'll notice that my marks are kind of light and wispy here. That actually helps build up the type of contrast that you want without it being too kind of heavy-handed. So try lighter marks for that. And if you're drawing glass or anything that's reflective, the other thing to think about is you have your stem of the rose, right? And it's going into the vase. And when it goes into the vase, it causes a little bit of distortion because now you're looking at it through the glass. So if you're able to kind of show some of that blur or some of that slight distortion of your object, because if it's in the vase, that's going to make it look even better, even more realistic, okay? You want to try to observe all the different variation that you see on your glass. So when I look at the glass, I see midtones and I see darks and I see highlights, and I'm trying to record that, and I'm also trying to show the contrast there. And when you're drawing a vase, what I did was I drew a line down the center because I wanted it to be symmetrical, and I was actually having trouble getting it to look symmetrical. So if you draw a line in the middle of the center of your vase, if you're drawing a vase, it will help you get that symmetry because you can kind of just like look at it and make sure that they're symmetrical. So try that if you're having trouble with your object getting it symmetrical. So going back to, the vase is sort of bringing together all the things that we've talked about so far today. So we talked about contrast, we talked about, the precise details, and we talked about direction of line. And as you can see, I'm bringing kind of together all those different tips just in this area too. And you want to just keep layering your lines until you're happy with the effects that you're getting. And again, you can sort of see where the stem kind of dips into the water. And so then it distorts again because it's going around that water. So those are the kind of details that I want you to look for. And you'll see here the marks that I'm making kind of going around that stem. That actually kind of looks like where the water sort of like like a little ripple, I guess you could call it. I don't know how else to say it, but you have the lines kind of going around, and it's sort of like it's going to show the texture of the water. So this is all about textures, right? You've got the clear water, you've got the glass and the petals, and so you want to like kind of look at those different textures and try to see if you can use lines to show those different textures. Now, it's taken me about 10 minutes to explain this, but if you want to put in the comments and guess how long it took me actually to draw this, it's a lot longer than 10 minutes. So you can put it in the comments and I'll tell you who gets the closest guess for how long this one took. So this is an intricate one, but it was a fun one to draw. And okay, so next thing we're going to do is now we're going to add some whites in order to make it look a little bit more 3D. And so I want you to look at your object if you're drawing something similar, and I want you to look at where your lightest lights are. And this is the great thing about using gray paper, right? Because with the gray paper, you can bring out those highlights a little bit more and it'll look even more 3D, it'll look more glass-like, it'll just look great, okay? So these little bit of reflections can really transform your drawing even more. And to make these reflections, I started with the Prismacolor white, and then I'm using the Posca marker. So the Posca will give you a bolder white, like just a brighter white. The only thing is just you don't want to go overboard with this. This is like one of those things where like less is more. So sometimes people kind of like go a little bit too much, and you don't want to do that. So you want to be minimal on this. A little goes a long way. Okay, now I'm going to show you one last thing. You can go back into your drawing of the rose with colored pencils if you want. So this is one of those things, you don't need to do it, but if you want to, the colored pencils, the Prismacolors, which I'll also link in the description in this video, are really good because when you're using gray paper, you can use the colored pencils to kind of give like a pop of color. So that's just something that if you want to add, you can. You definitely don't need to. I feel like the drawing is okay without it too, but if it's something that you want to try, it's a good thing to kind of like give an extra pop of color. So as always, thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you next time. Thank you.